Good morning, everybody. Nice to see you today for this first session. I'm Martin. I'm from Germany, from the Georg-August University in Göttingen, and I work at the Institute for Sports Science in the working area of sociology of sports and health. And today I would like to present you a little bit about Taekkyon. A question for the start: who of you has ever heard the name Taekkyon? Okay, at least a few, some, good. I first heard the name Taekkyon, I think it was in 2012, when I was doing my research for my master's thesis on the history of Taekwondo. More well-known martial art than Taekkyon, of course. And there Taekkyon was always presented as being somehow the ancestral art of Taekwondo, and Taekwondo basically evolved from Taekkyon with minor influences from other arts. But basically the narrative of official sources was that Taekwondo is basically a modernized form of Taekkyon with another name. Of course, today we know that this is not that true, thanks to works by Udo Möhnig, for example, who wrote a very interesting book about the history of Taekwondo from martial arts to martial sports, as he called it. And today what I would like to do is I would like to give an introduction on Taekkyon, what Taekkyon is, how it's practiced today, how we believe it was practiced in the past or not, and to give some first research questions, because now I'm in the stage of like looking for specific areas where I can go with this topic, and hopefully I will get some feedback from you, so I can find my way in this research field. So what is Taekkyon? Taekkyon, there are different spellings of Taekkyon, which is because of the different historical areas, historical periods that we talk about, but also because there are not there were changes in the Korean spelling system. So there are different ways that we can spell Taekkyon. Down here you can see like Korean spellings of Taekkyon. You see that also the Korean spelling is different, not only the English spelling. And what we can say about Taekkyon, that it's basically, you could say, a bodily practice. Other than Taekwondo, we can really trace it back historically. So there are historical evidences that some bodily practice with the name of Taekkyon or Taekkyon was practiced in Korea. It was first mentioned in the poem from 1728, where it's named Taekkyon. And we don't know too much about the historical practice. What we have is, you see, for example, this painting here from a Korean painter, which is called the Taekkyon. For those of you who are familiar with Taekwondo sources on the history of Taekwondo, this is a picture you always see in Taekwondo textbooks. Like, this is basically how Taekkyon was or is seen to be practiced. Here you see a picture, a photograph. I think it was by an English missionary who took this picture in 1890 of two children who are thought to be playing Taekkyon. What you see here is also the way Taekkyon was mostly thought of being practiced together with other arts. You see a festival here, probably the Dano festival, Korean Dano Festival, and you see people watching, having a good time, drinking, of course, chatting, and watching people do some kind of martial game activity, probably. And one thing that we know about Taekkyon, a very important thing we know about Taekkyon is the basic stepping pattern of Taekkyon. So similar to capoeira, where we have the jinga, we have some kind of basic stepping pattern in Taekkyon as well, which is called pumbalki. And pumbalki basically means stepping the pum. And the pum is this Chinese character here. The meaning of the character is not really important here. It means something like great, I think. Could mean something like great. But what it means that you step the pattern of this Chinese character, which is in this 3-beat rhythm from this starting point, and you step in this way. As you can see, it's a very crucial aspect of that is bending your knees up and down, and this you can find in many other Korean dance traditions and theatrical traditions. So, kind of a commonality between Taekkyon and other cultural practices. Taekkyon was practiced mostly before the time of the Japanese occupation of Korea, which was in 1910, I think, mostly in the Seoul area. We don't know too much about other areas of Korea where Taekkyon was practiced. And during the time of the Japanese occupation, it became almost lost, you could say. People from Korean martial arts context, they often claim that martial arts were banned in Korea during the occupation, but that's not really the case. People mostly practice Japanese martial arts, like judo and kendo, for example. But what was banned were gatherings of people, like larger gatherings of people. That was banned, and because Taekkyon was mostly practiced in those occasions where people gathered and had a good time together and had fun together, so it naturally decreased in popularity. It was then rediscovered in the 1950s after the Korean War, and basically what's also quite interesting and controversial, the most things we know about the practice of Taekkyon today was handed down by this man, Song Dok-gi, and he learned Taekkyon in the Joseon dynasty before the Japanese occupation, and he's basically the only one who conserved Taekkyon during the Japanese occupation and taught then others after the Korean War, who then spread Taekkyon more widely in South Korea. Another very important figure is Shin Han-seung. You can see him over here. He was basically the one who systematized Taekkyon then in that way that we see it today, mostly. What's also interesting for Taekwondo practitioners, or those who are interested in the history of Taekwondo, on the very left picture you see Song Dok-gi practicing with Park Chul-hee, who was one of the pioneers of Taekwondo and was one of the main founders of one of the 9 Gwan, so the schools that later formed what we know or what we know today as Taekwondo. As I said, it was rediscovered in the 50s, but until it really got more and more popular in South Korea, it took until the 1970s and 1980s. In the 1970s, beginning in the 1970s, there was some kind of cultural resurrection in South Korea, you could say, where also the government got more and more interest in traditional Korean culture. Many cultural practices in South Korea, like samulnori, for example, or pansori, which are performance genres in South Korea, they were also systematized in the 1970s. So this was very interesting area for cultural practices in South Korea. In 1983, Taekkyon became important intangible cultural asset, and also Songdokgi and Shinhansung were designated as living national treasures by the South Korean government. Here you can see the certificate that Songdokgi got for being designated a living national treasure. What's also interesting is, and this now we come to a larger world scale, in 2011, Taekkyon was designated intangible cultural heritage by the UNESCO as the first martial art, you could say. And then later other martial arts practices like Tai Chi, I think, and Capoeira and Silat also followed. So now we have even more martial arts being intangible cultural heritage. How Taekkyon is practiced today is very different from what we believe it was practiced in the past. There is not one single Taekkyon entity, you could say, but there are 4 different styles or associations today that all look quite different from each other, actually. One is the Korea Taekkyon Association, which is based in Chungju city, and this is also the one that's mainly recognized by the UNESCO. So when you look up videos on Taekkyon, for example, on YouTube, this is mostly what you see. Next one is the Korea Taekkyon Federation, or Daehan Taekkyon. This is mostly the biggest Taekkyon association in Korea right now, but their focus is more towards sports, let's say, and to get Taekkyon being acknowledged by the IOC and then hopefully become Olympic sports. Who knows if this will ever happen. But yeah, so they have a more sporting-oriented style or practice of Taekkyon. Then we have the Kyollyon Taekkyon Association, which is quite small, but they try to more focus on the historical way of competition, which you can see here, for example. Then finally we have the Uide Taekkyon Preservation Society, which is based in Los Angeles, which is interesting because the head of this association, he moved to Los Angeles in the 1980s. As I said, those styles of Taekkyon are very, very different in different ways. I will talk about this in a bit. The cause for that is that, for example, the head of the Korea Taekkyon Association and the Korea Taekkyon Federation, they both mostly trained under Shin Han-seung, who was a disciple of Songdokgi. And the other ones, Do Ki-hyun from the Kyollyon Taekkyon Association and Ko Young-woo from the Uide Taekkyon Preservation Society, they directly trained under Songdokgi. So there you already can see this is a major factor for a big split in what evolved in today's Taekkyon. I would like to speak a little bit about academic writings on Taekkyon in English. In Korean, there are a lot more writings on Taekkyon. I don't know if you're aware of that, but in South Korea you can study Taekwondo at university, and because of that there is a lot of research done on Taekwondo, and it's similar with Taekkyon, not as big as Taekwondo, but also on Taekkyon. So there is a lot of academic writing on Taekkyon in Korean. In English, we don't have that much academic sources on Taekkyon. But I would like to point out two articles here. The one is the available evidence regarding Taekkyon and its portrayal as a traditional Korean martial arts. Udo Mönig was one of the writers of this article, and this is very critical about if we can really call Taekkyon a traditional martial art in a way as we perceive martial arts today. Another article, this is by Korean scholars, the heritization and institutionalization of Taekkyon as intangible cultural heritage, which goes like basically the opposite direction and states that Taekkyon is a martial art, it always has been a martial art, and we should perceive it as such. Then we have a companion on Taekkyon of articles that were published in the Journal of Asian Martial Arts. I won't go too much into detail about that, but I would like to point out those final two over there by a Korean author Kim Yong-man. He is a Taekkyon practitioner and also academic, and he has some very interesting claims that go in a very similar direction as previous sources on Taekwondo, which claim that Taekkyon, of course, has to be like 2,000 years old and was practiced by warrior classes on the battlefield and whatnot. Cheers. So now I would like to talk a little bit about what we know about Taekkyon, especially the historical practice of Taekkyon. We don't know too much. Most of what we know according to those historical sources that I showed you. We have like 3 or 4 pictures maybe that depict Taekkyon. We have a poem that depict Taekkyon. We have some legal documents, mostly from the late 19th century, where Taekkyon or the participation in Taekkyon was forbidden, and I will come back to that in a bit. What we also know that Taekkyon was practiced in the Seoul area of Korea during the 1900s, early 1900s. What we don't know if Taekkyon was also practiced in other areas of Korea, or if it was practiced under a different name. These are things that we don't know. It was mostly practiced as a folk game, similar to those styles you can see here. It was practiced as a way of a grappling game. So it was a game of teams, of 2 teams competing with each other, and you could win a fight by either tripping or throwing your opponent so that he touches the ground with his knee or his hand, or you can win a fight by a kick to the face. So either you have to kick your opponent to the face, or you have to throw or trip him to the ground. Then you're the winner, and you stay in the ring, and the next one comes in. It's like, I don't know what's the name, King of the Hill or something like that, right? And when one team is finished, one team doesn't have any more competitors, then the other team has won, basically. We know that Taekkyon, and now this is about these legal documents I mentioned. We know that there was a lot of gambling and prize fighting involved in Taekkyon, as in other martial practices like boxing and pugilism in Europe, for example, and in America. And there are also hints that Taekkyon was practiced by criminal gangs also, and therefore there was a little bit of a problem there. What we don't know is a lot more than we know. We don't really know where Taekkyon was practiced. We don't know how it was practiced. We don't really know what techniques they used. So we know about some techniques that Songdokgi spoke about and taught to his disciples, but we don't know what other techniques probably were practiced. And sorry, there is one in German. I see. And
just to test whether we're
yeah. If you're still with me. So we also don't know how Taekkyon really evolved in the history during the years. We don't know much. However, it seems that Taekkyon was not really something that we today would perceive as a martial art. So Taekkyon didn't have any forms. We know about that. Taekkyon didn't have any specific philosophy or ethics or moral guidelines or anything like that. It didn't have any aspects of spirituality or things like that. It didn't have any uniforms. The people, they practiced Taekkyon in their everyday clothes. Taekkyon didn't have a fixed curriculum. It didn't have any ranks. It's believed that it was maybe practiced a little bit like skateboarding was practiced in the 80s and 90s, I think. So there was a senior maybe, and he showed the others some things, but there was not like formal hierarchical structure there. What's also quite common for martial arts today. So these are all things that we basically don't know. So it's more that we don't know that we know, actually. I don't know, how much time do I have left?
You actually have 10 minutes if we could do a full 30.
Okay,
so
okay.
If you want to talk a little bit more, that's fine.
Just a bit. I would like to show you a little bit about some ethnographic research that I already did on Taekkyon. And it was during the World Taekkyon Masterships in Chungju, which were organized by the Chungju, the Chungju-based Taekkyon Association mostly last year in August. And I don't expect you to be able to read everything, but what I want to tell you about this event is basically that this Taekkyon organization, with the support of the Korean government, they invited I think 10 people from different countries of the world to Korea. Some were from Eastern Europe. There were people from Eastern Europe, from Southeast Asia, from whatnot. Yeah, from different countries, and they were invited to come to Korea to practice Taekkyon, as you can see here, for about 1 week. They were introduced to Taekkyon, and then at the end of this, you can say a stay or seminar, they participated in the World Taekkyon competition that was held there in Chungju, and there were also some Korean athletes there, but mostly it was made up by those people who were invited to come to Chungju and practice Taekkyon there. Here you see some impressions. I also did some interviews there, but I have not worked on them yet, so I'm still looking for possible questions to look at those interviews according to. But here you can see some impressions for the event. So there were basically 3 events. One was sparring in Taekkyon style, you could say. One was only wrestling type of sparring, and the third one was obviously also forms, which you can see here. What's also an interesting fact that, because we know that there were no forms in Taekkyon before, now there are, at least in this style. Some other pictures. Yeah, one participant from Poland, for example. And now, to conclude my presentation, I would like to pop up some possible research questions or areas that you can that I would orientate myself towards too. And first one is, how do the styles of Taekkyon differ from each other? As I told you, there are quite a lot of differences in that. So a possible question could be how those styles are different from each other, what were the influences, and why the changes were made as they were made, right? Then another question would be a historical oriented one. So how was Taekkyon practiced in the past? Is it possible to gain some more insights from historical documents, probably, that we haven't find yet? Maybe even from foreign visitors as missionaries and others. What role did Taekkyon play in the anti-Japanese independence movement? So this is a claim that's frequently made by Korean scholars, that Taekkyon was heavily, or maybe not heavily, but used a lot in the anti-Japanese independence movement. So this would be an interesting question, whether this was really the case, and if so, in what extent and in what way. Then, of course, Taekkyon and the problem of intangible cultural heritage. As I told you, it was designated as intangible cultural heritage by the UNESCO in 2011. And as you can see, we don't know much about the historical practice. Today's practice is quite heterogenic, right? So to problematize this whole thing of intangible cultural heritage, according to Taekkyon being designated as one. Then Taekkyon and strategies of soft diplomacy. As you remember, I showed you the pictures from this Taekkyon competition. So Taekkyon is used a lot in this way. And it would be interesting to look more into that. And finally, Taekkyon and definitions of martial arts. As I told you, Taekkyon was very differently practiced in the past, and it somehow was made into a martial art. So somehow ask this question of martial arts, how martial arts are perceived by looking at movement practice that was modeled to be a martial art. Yeah, and I would like to conclude, and happy to hear feedback.
Well, I'm hoping we can